Story 1. Social worker. For legal reasons, I cannot elaborate. Some individuals should not be permitted to reproduce. Story 2. I went to rehabilitation with a former police officer who worked in the cybercrime department in the late 1990s and early 2000s. Back then, not as many people were connected, so contrary to belief, there were not as many scams. A large part of their work consisted of busting child pornography distribution rings. This was before there was any reliable way to classify this material, so in preparation for court, the evidence had to be reviewed and documented manually. Even back then, they could easily confiscate hundreds of gigabytes, if not terabytes, of child pornography. Some days were literally spent from 9 to 5 watching and documenting children being sexually abused. The worst thing was if the video material had sound and there was an unidentified individual in the background talking, because then the video would be marked and reviewed repeatedly against other recordings to compare voices. Naturally, the turnover rate, sick leave, and substance abuse in the department were significantly higher compared to the rest of the police force. Many of them ended up with alcohol and drug problems, which is very understandable. I'll never forget what he said at my first Alcoholics Anonymous meeting. I've cleaned up the remains of people who jumped in front of high-speed trains. I've seen people burned to death, stuck in a car while screaming for their loved ones. And somehow I managed to not take that home with me. But once you've seen an infant being abused to the point of bleeding, there's just no coming back from that. Story 3. Child abuse investigator. When my wife worked in Kansas, the turnover rate exceeded 100%. She stayed for 18 months, which was about double the average. Humans are capable of pure evil. Story 4. This can depend on the person, but here is a list of jobs and industries with the highest suicide rates. Working nights is also typically detrimental to mental health. Story 5. As nobody else has said it yet, I have heard that working in a slaughterhouse is an absolutely soul-crushing job, even for people who might otherwise claim not to have a problem with it. Story 6. IME firefighters, emergency medical technicians, paramedics, police officers, and anyone in the medical field often encounter death and the abuse of individuals. This is why I retired, to maintain my mental health. Story 7. Social workers and mental health counselors carry the weight of others' emotional and life challenges every day. They deserve major respect for their resilience and dedication. Story 8. The investigators who review child pornography face a profoundly challenging job that can significantly impact their mental and emotional health. Story 9. Statistically, being a veterinarian can be challenging. Imagine attending school for years because you love animals, only to find yourself euthanizing animals several times a week, often not for justifiable reasons. Story 10. Anyone who works with children knows they often have a limited understanding of trauma. They may casually mention distressing events, such as, "My dad tried to shoot my mom yesterday, so the police took him away. Now I have to go to my grandma's after school, and I don't have the chapter book we're reading. I'm expected to note this and continue with my day." Story 11. I have been a teacher for 16 years, which takes a mental toll for sure. I find that being a stay-at-home parent takes about the same toll, but then I feel guilty for feeling burnt out by my own family. Story 12. Quota-carrying sales positions involve starting from scratch every month and every year. You need to make outbound calls, handle objections, manage rejections, and often deal with a difficult boss who may have had 2 successful years in your role and received a promotion, even though many sales managers are not effective. Story 13. Definitely healthcare, especially emergency and mental health services. The experiences they encounter and the pressure they operate under are unimaginable. Story 14. Working on a psychiatric unit for patients with severe dementia symptoms in the public system in Canada presents numerous challenges. There is a lack of funding and resources, leading to short staffing. Patients can be extremely violent, aggressive, sexual, and unpredictable. Caring for individuals who are at risk and actively try to harm others is emotionally draining. Story 15. On a personal level, there are many good answers here. However, globally speaking, employees struggle to make a living despite working extremely hard. Story 16. I would say end-of-life caregivers face incredibly challenging situations. I have never been comfortable with death. It deeply unsettles me, and I often feel overwhelmed. I don't know why, but I find it necessary to distance myself from these experiences. Story 17. A former military personnel worked in food services before transitioning to the casino industry. They are currently employed in community health after brief stints as a crime scene cleaner and doorman at a dispensary. The casino experience was the worst by far. Military life was challenging, but it's expected to involve sacrifice. Story 18. Fast food and food service. I felt less than human with the way I was treated by people just because we forgot something on their order or anything else. I also perform a great deal of labor for very little pay. It's awful. Story 19. Almost anything medically related on an emergency basis involves emergency room nurses, doctors, emergency medical technicians, veterinarians, veterinary technicians, and sometimes police officers and firefighters. Witnessing people and animals in critical condition and losing patience erodes your mental health over time. Some experiences blur together into a mess of trauma, while others remain clear in your memory. Both are difficult to endure. I am quite stoic and able to compartmentalize better than most. I still remember the only 2 times I cried at work as vividly as the days they occurred. Story 20. Of the experiences I've had, working as a debt collector was particularly challenging. There is only so much mistreatment one can endure. My official reason for quitting was that the abuse I received from customers was affecting my personal life. Story 21. Slaughterhouse workers, especially in large facilities, end lives repeatedly day in and day out. I'm not a vegetarian and I never plan to be. That experience affects you deeply. Story 22. I can think of a few: firefighters, police officers, social workers, military personnel, first responders, and air traffic controllers. Story 23. I'm no expert, but seeing what people who work in the emergency room section of a hospital go through every day has to be among the most challenging. Whether it's losing patients, being mistreated by difficult individuals, or watching people suffer daily, this must be one of the top 5 worst jobs for mental health. Unless you're a person who has no empathy or sympathy, that might actually make sense when I think about it. I've had some nurses be unkind to me when I was nothing but polite and respectful to them. Story 24. Right now, being a Democrat in Congress is challenging. Imagine someone breaks into your workplace, targeting you, goes to prison for it, and 4 years later is pardoned by the president and assigned to work with you, knowing they dislike you. I personally cannot imagine the level of emotional suffering some of them are experiencing. Waking up every day to plead with people who do not care to perhaps show some mercy. It may seem like a left-wing perspective, but I genuinely think about the fact that these individuals work under a cruel leader who constantly breaks the rules, and that leader has complete and absolute power. Just think about how much worse it will become for them as people are allowed to commit more and more terrible acts. Story 25. The worst job I have personally held is being a chef. I have been a professional chef for 6 years. If you are not very serious about it, the most challenging aspect is dealing with the public. However, if you are very serious about it, the most challenging aspect is your own motivation. Story 26. Baking is physically demanding. You wake up early in the morning or even in the middle of the night to complete orders. People often try to place last-minute orders without realizing that baking is a process. If something goes wrong, you can't just start over because you are always on a deadline. Despite the challenges, I love my job, but I need to find a better balance. Story 27. Definitely a psychologist. Hundreds of people are counting on you for your help. The pressure and responsibility of so many people's problems can really take a toll. I can't imagine how it feels to find out that one of your clients, who depended on you, committed suicide. That must be another gut-wrenching feeling, like you failed them. Definitely a psychologist. Story 28. Anything with management that is completely inept because you are usually doing their job on top of your own. Story 29. Emergency medical technicians and other first responders play a crucial role. I cannot imagine what it is like to spend an entire shift responding to accidents and crises and witnessing distressing scenes regularly. Story 30. Slaughterhouse worker, especially the person responsible for the killing. Dairy farm. Listening to dairy cows cry for months over the loss of their calves is distressing. Cows, like all mammals, must be pregnant to produce milk. The baby calf is seen as competition for the milk, and that is where veal comes from. When milk production starts to decline, artificial insemination is used, and the cycle begins again. Dairy is the most cruel of all our industries. If anyone treated a dog the way we treat cows, they would be in prison. Story 31. One where your employer expects you to train and retrain the person who should not have been hired for the job. Story 32. I knew a woman who was a crime scene photographer. She had many stories to tell and plenty of sleepless nights. Story 33. Post office and first responders? I witnessed a mother murder her child after being a first responder. That was a definite reason for me to find a new job. Story 34. I am a social worker, and I love my job. It is hard but satisfying. The most challenging experiences I have encountered were not due to the work itself, but rather the work culture. Negative attitudes and unsupportive administration are more difficult to handle than hard work. Story 35. The most damaging position I ever had was in a youth prison, working with older teenagers. I lasted 9 months there. My coworkers were hardened by the environment. I don't know how they managed it, other than by shutting off their emotions. The culture dictates that you cannot even like the incarcerated youth, and truly, most of them are unlikable, even though they are products of their damaged backgrounds. Story 36. Other than social services, emergency medical services, police, firefighters, and nurses, I would say politicians. Look at how much Barack Obama aged from the day he took office to the day he left, or how much Volodymyr Zelensky aged. You can see in their faces that they genuinely care about their people. In contrast, look at Donald Trump, Vladimir Putin, Kim Jong-un, or Benjamin Netanyahu. I would also add being poor to the list. The constant stress of figuring out how to make ends meet can cause premature aging. For those who resort to sex work for financial reasons rather than personal desire, they often face serious issues as well. Story 37. A drone operator must be present, especially when conducting surveillance on targets prior to a strike. Story 38. I will refer to police officers or individuals who deal with violent crimes. I can imagine the things they have to witness. Story 39. Being the person who has to explain to older adults that the internet is not broken and that Google is not a person they can call is challenging. Every day, I feel a little defeated as I watch someone type Google into the search engine or yell hello into a muted video call. One time, a man asked me to reinstall the Wi-Fi. I still have nightmares. Please keep us in your thoughts. Story 40. Anything you do that involves people directly, where their lives and safety are in your hands, such as social work, psychotherapy, or surgery, is significant. Story 41. Working with individuals who have severe trauma or mental health challenges requires emotional resilience. You must remain unaffected by their reactions to avoid appearing inhumane and to prevent developing your own issues. Story 42. Being a doctor, nurse, or paramedic in the medical field involves facing the harsh reality of losing patients almost every day and delivering the heartbreaking news to their families. I know I couldn't handle a job like that. Story 43. I used to be a police officer. There are worse situations, but I have seen terrible things and met awful people, including coworkers. Story 44. Infantry soldier with a flamethrower. You walk around with a bomb strapped to your back and burn people at close range. Story 45. I was a field technician for Ericsson on the Sprint network after they let go of most of the experienced staff. It was a challenging situation that took a major toll on me. Story 46. I was a field technician for Ericsson on the Sprint network after they let go of 99% of the experienced staff. It was a chaotic situation, took a major toll on me. Story 47. There are many jobs with worse mental health statistics than mine, but I am a delivery driver. A lot of people struggle with our terrible work-life balance. We have great pay, excellent insurance, and a pension, which is beneficial for when emergencies arise. However, while working, you might leave your home at 7 a.m. and get home around 9 p.m. or later every day. Just when you think you are having a good day, they will assign you additional tasks or send you to assist other drivers, which can ruin your day. The company is notoriously overbearing about trivial matters and holds us to an impossible standard of perfection. Every mistake falls on the drivers to resolve and can be grounds for termination if management decides to let you go. It is the only job I have ever had where they call you a professional but treat you like you are in an entry-level position. Story 48. Caregiving, particularly in the area of memory care, is incredibly challenging. Watching individuals gradually lose their memories and bodily autonomy is a profoundly difficult experience. Additionally, you witness their decline and strive to make their remaining time as comfortable as possible. In the approximately 3 years I spent in this field, I witnessed far too many deaths. Memory care was the hardest aspect of this work. Story 49. Running a restaurant. Most consumers are unaware of the many variables that must come together for a perfect meal. Story 50. Maybe not the most stressful, but if you have people under you, they can be needy and incompetent. There are some outstanding individuals in the team, and you have to remind yourself that not everyone is exceptional. Story 51. Moderator for social media. Story 52. I worked in veterinary medicine at a clinic that handled most emergencies and collaborated closely with 2 local rescues, in addition to the city's animal control. I have witnessed some truly sad and downright outrageous events. I worked in veterinary medicine for 5 years, and it has been about 3 years since I left to become a stay-at-home parent. Some stories are still difficult to recall without becoming emotional. Story 53. There are several good answers here that qualify. To add one, I see the stress on special education teachers is really high, often leading to tears. This stress comes from the school administration and decision-makers who generally do not perform their jobs and simply place the burden on teachers. Story 54. The patient was not mine, but my friend had her as a patient. She was not fully aware, and it was evident during conversation. I am unsure why she was admitted to my facility, but I remember she had stitches in her head. My friend was attending to another patient when she went to check on her. Upon entering the room, she found blood running down the patient's face because the wound had reopened. Story 55. Being a building contractor, the physical demands of the job and the mental stress from customers who want things one way and then another make it incredibly difficult to manage at times. Although I enjoy my occupation, there are moments when I just want to scream. Being a builder of other people's dreams can be very stressful and detrimental to mental health. Story 56. Forensics department in the police. Yes, that is a suitcase with a decapitated 5-year-old girl in it. Oh, the spouse is calling, wanting to know if we should have penne or spaghetti tonight. Story 57. Firefighters used the jaws of life to rescue a trapped person from a crumpled truck, while their son and wife lay deceased beside them. Story 58. Abattoir processing worker. If it bothers you and you keep doing it, it just adds to the horror. If it doesn't bother you, that raises some questions. Story 59. Teachers spend their own money on school supplies. They handle administrative work after hours and often bring the emotional toll of their work home with them. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.